I never expected my life would change because of a pair of pajamas. But that's exactly what happened last winter when my neighbor, Jake, knocked on my door at 11 p.m. on a Friday night. Let me take you back to how it all began, to the series of seemingly random events that led to one of the most meaningful relationships of my life. I'd been living in the Oakwood apartments for about 8 months when Jake moved in next door. He was everything I wasn't: confident, outgoing, and effortlessly charming. Standing at about 6'2" with dark brown hair that always seemed perfectly disheveled, Jake had this way of making everyone feel comfortable around him. He played college football, worked as a personal trainer, and had a laugh that carried through the thin walls of our apartment building. I'd hear him coming home late on weekends, sometimes with friends, their voices and laughter a reminder of a social life I wasn't part of. Me? I was quieter, more reserved. I spent my days working from home as a graphic designer, rarely venturing out except for groceries or the occasional coffee at the shop down the street. I'd known I was gay since high school, but living in a smaller city meant I was still cautious about who I shared that part of myself with. Not that I was hiding, exactly, but I wasn't broadcasting it either. It's funny how we build these invisible walls around ourselves, isn't it? We think they're protecting us, but sometimes they're just keeping us isolated. Jake and I had the kind of neighborly relationship that consisted mainly of polite nods in the hallway and occasional small talk about the weather or the perpetually broken elevator. He'd help me carry groceries up to 3 flights of stairs sometimes, and I'd collect his packages when they were delivered while he was at work. Simple, uncomplicated interactions that meant nothing and everything at the same time. I'd be lying if I said I didn't look forward to those brief exchanges, or that I didn't find excuses to be in the hallway when I knew he'd be coming home from his evening training sessions. There was something about Jake that drew me to him, beyond the obvious physical attraction. He had this genuine warmth, a way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room when he spoke to you. His eyes would lock onto yours, giving you his full attention, making you feel seen in a way that was both terrifying and exhilarating. I found myself thinking about him more than I cared to admit, constructing elaborate fantasies about what his life was like, who his friends were, who he dated. It was harmless, I told myself. Just a little crush on my straight neighbor. Nothing would ever come of it. That Friday night started like any other. I was working late on a design project, my apartment quiet except for the soft music playing from my speakers and the occasional ping of an email notification. Outside, rain pounded against my windows, the kind of heavy downpour that makes you grateful to be indoors. I was just about to call it a night when I heard the knock. 3 quick raps, hesitant but deliberate. I wasn't expecting anyone, and for a moment I considered ignoring it. But curiosity got the better of me, and I found myself padding to the door in my socks, peering through the peephole to see Jake standing there, completely drenched. "Hey, sorry to bother you so late," he said when I opened the door, water dripping from his hair onto his face. He was wearing a white t-shirt that had become nearly transparent from the rain, clinging to his chest and shoulders in a way that made it hard for me to maintain eye contact. "My power just went out, and I was wondering if yours is still on." I nodded, stepping back to let him in. "Yeah, everything's working fine here. Come in, you're soaked." Jake hesitated for just a moment before stepping inside, careful to stay on the welcome mat. "Thanks, man. I was at the gym when the storm hit, and I ran all the way home without an umbrella like an idiot. Then I get home to a dark apartment and realize I can't even take a hot shower." I grabbed a towel from the bathroom and handed it to him. "Here, dry off before you catch a cold. Do you want some tea or something?" I was just about to make some. He accepted the towel gratefully, running it through his hair. "Tea would be amazing, actually. I'm freezing." As I moved to the kitchen to put the kettle on, I could feel my heart racing. Jake had never been in my apartment before. This was new territory, and I wasn't sure how to navigate it. I busied myself with mugs and tea bags, trying to act casual while being acutely aware of his presence in my space. "Nice place," he called from the living room. "A lot tidier than mine." I laughed, relaxing a little. Perks of working from home. I'd go crazy if I had to look at mess all day. We fell into easy conversation as the tea steeped. Jake told me about his day, about a client who had nearly passed out during a particularly intense training session, about his plans to visit his parents the following weekend. I found myself opening up too, sharing details about the project I was working on, my frustration with a difficult client, my love for the coffee shop on the corner that made the perfect cappuccino. It was strange how comfortable it felt, how natural. The rain continued to pour outside, creating a cozy backdrop to our unexpected evening together. An hour passed, then two. We moved from tea to beer, sitting on my couch with a comfortable distance between us, laughing about the absurdities of apartment living and sharing stories about our worst roommate experiences. So that's when I walked in and found him using my electric toothbrush to clean his shoes, Jake was saying, his eyes crinkling at the corners as he laughed. I moved out the next day. I was mid-laugh when the lights flickered once, twice, and then went out completely, plunging us into darkness. Well, there goes my power too, I said, fumbling for my phone to turn on the flashlight. Looks like the whole building might be affected now. Jake's face appeared in the glow of my phone, shadows playing across his features. Sorry I brought my bad luck over here, he said, but he was smiling. Got any candles? I did have candles, and soon my small living room was bathed in a warm, flickering light. The atmosphere had shifted, become more intimate somehow. We sat closer on the couch now, our shoulders occasionally brushing as we reached for our beers. The conversation had turned more personal, the darkness making it easier to share things we might not have in the harsh light of day. Can I ask you something? Jake said after a moment of comfortable silence. And feel free to tell me it's none of my business. I nodded, my stomach tightening with anticipation. Sure. Are you seeing anyone? I never see you with dates or anything, and you never mention a partner. The question caught me off guard. I took a sip of my beer, buying time. No, I'm not seeing anyone right now. Haven't for a while, actually. Jake nodded, his expression thoughtful. Same here. Broke up with my girlfriend about 6 months ago, right before I moved in. It was for the best, but still. It's hard, I finished for him. Being alone. Yeah, he agreed, his eyes meeting mine in the candlelight. It is. There was something in that look, something I couldn't quite decipher. For a wild moment, I considered telling him everything. How I felt when I saw him in the hallway, how I looked forward to our brief conversations, how I thought about him more than I should. But the moment passed, and I held my tongue. Some risks weren't worth taking. The storm outside intensified, rain lashing against the windows with renewed vigor. A particularly loud crack of thunder made us both jump and then laugh at our shared reaction. Doesn't look like it's letting up anytime soon, Jake observed, glancing toward the window. And I doubt the power's coming back tonight. I followed his gaze, watching the rain streak down the glass. Probably not. I should probably head back to my place, he said, though he made no move to get up. Try to get some sleep. You could stay. I offered before I could stop myself. I mean, your place is going to be dark and probably getting cold. I have a couch, or I have spare pajamas if you want to crash here. The words hung in the air between us, heavy with implication. I immediately regretted them, sure I'd crossed a line. But to my surprise, Jake smiled. Pajamas, huh? Are they going to have little ducks on them or something? The tension broke, and I laughed, relieved. No ducks, I promise. Just plain flannel. Very manly. In that case, I accept, he said, raising his beer in a mock toast. To unexpected sleepovers. I clinked my bottle against his. To unexpected sleepovers. I led him to my bedroom to find the pajamas, feeling strangely nervous about letting him see this more personal space. My room was simple but distinctly mine. Books stacked on the nightstand, a framed print of a Monet painting on the wall, a small plant on the windowsill that somehow hadn't died, yet despite my inconsistent care. Jake looked around with interest as I rummaged through my dresser. This is nice, he said. Peaceful. I handed him a folded set of blue flannel pajamas. Thanks. Bathroom's just across the hall if you want to change. He took the pajamas, our fingers brushing briefly in the exchange. Thanks, but I can just change here if that's okay. Unless it makes you uncomfortable. My heart skipped a beat. No, that's fine, I said, hoping my voice sounded steadier than I felt. I'll, give you some privacy. I turned to leave, but Jake's voice stopped me. You don't have to go. We're both guys, right? Nothing you haven't seen before. There was an innocence to his statement that almost made me laugh. If only he knew how different this was for me, how the thought of him changing in my bedroom sent my pulse racing. But I nodded and busied myself with finding extra blankets and pillows for the couch, keeping my back to him as I heard the rustle of clothing. These are surprisingly comfortable, Jake said after a moment. and they fit pretty well. I turned to find him standing there in my pajamas, looking somehow both ridiculous and endearing. The pants were a bit short, revealing his ankles, but otherwise they suited him. There was something intimate about seeing him in my clothes, something that made my chest tighten. Good, I managed. They look good on you. He grinned, doing a little spin. You think? Maybe I should wear pajamas more often. We laughed, and the moment of tension passed. I showed him where the extra blankets were, set him up on the couch, and retreated to my bedroom with a casual good night that belied the turmoil inside me. Lying in bed, listening to the occasional sounds of movement from the living room, I wondered what I'd gotten myself into. Sleep eluded me for hours as I replayed the evening in my mind, analyzing every word, every look, every moment of connection. It was just friendship, I told myself. Just two neighbors riding out a storm together. Nothing more. I must have fallen asleep eventually, because the next thing I knew, sunlight was streaming through my curtains. The power was back on. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator and the gentle whir of the heating system. For a moment, I wondered if the previous night had been a dream. But then I heard movement in the kitchen, the clink of mugs, the sound of water running. Jake was still here. I found him making coffee, still wearing my pajamas, his hair tousled from sleep. He looked up when I entered, his face breaking into a warm smile. Morning, he said. Hope you don't mind, but I figured coffee was the least I could do to thank you for the emergency shelter. I shook my head, trying to ignore how right he looked standing in my kitchen. Not at all. Thanks for making it. We sat at my small dining table, mugs of steaming coffee between us, the storm of the previous night replaced by a clear, bright morning. The conversation flowed as easily as it had the night before, but there was something different now, a new awareness between us that hadn't been there before. I should probably head back to my place, Jake said eventually, glancing at the clock. Get changed, check for any damage from the power outage. I nodded, ignoring the disappointment that settled in my stomach. Of course, you can keep the pajamas if you want. They suit you. He looked down at himself and laughed. Maybe I will. They're the most comfortable thing I've worn in ages. He paused, then added, thanks for last night. Not just for the place to crash, but for, the conversation. It was nice. It was, I agreed. Anytime. He stood to leave, gathering his still damp clothes from the night before. At the door, he hesitated, turning back to me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Hey, I was thinking of ordering pizza and watching the game tonight. Want to join? My place this time, to even the score. My heart leapt, but I kept my expression neutral. Sure, sounds good. Great, he said, his smile widening. It's a date. I mean, not a date, just a, you know what I mean. The slight flush that crept up his neck was new, and it sent a thrill through me that I tried desperately to suppress. I know what you mean, I assured him. See you tonight. After he left, I stood in my apartment, which suddenly seemed emptier than before. The spare pajamas had been a simple gesture, an act of neighborly kindness. I had no idea they would be the beginning of something much more complex. That evening at Jake's apartment was the first of many. We fell into a routine of shared meals, movie nights, and long conversations that stretched into the early hours of the morning. The boundaries of our friendship began to blur, shifting into something I couldn't quite define. Jake would casually drape his arm across my shoulders while we watched TV, or let his leg press against mine when we sat side by side. I told myself not to read into it, that this was just how he was with everyone. But sometimes I'd catch him looking at me when he thought I wouldn't notice, his expression contemplative, almost confused. Weeks passed, and the pajamas became something of an inside joke between us. Jake would wear them whenever he stayed late at my place, claiming they brought good luck. I never asked for them back, secretly loving the way they connected us. It was about a month after the storm when everything changed again. We were at my apartment, having dinner and talking about nothing in particular, when Jake suddenly went quiet. What's on your mind? I asked, noticing the shift in his mood. He looked up from his plate, his eyes meeting mine with an intensity that made my breath catch. Can I ask you something personal? I nodded, my heart beginning to race. Of course. Are you gay? The question hung in the air between us, heavy with implication. I considered lying, considered brushing it off with a joke, but something in his expression told me this was important. Yes, I said simply. I am. Jake nodded slowly, as if confirming something he'd already suspected. Why didn't you tell me? I shrugged, trying to appear more casual than I felt. It never came up. And I guess I wasn't sure how you'd react. How I'd react. He looked genuinely surprised. Did you think I'd have a problem with it? Not exactly, I admitted. But it can change things, you know? Friendships. Sometimes people get weird. Think you're interested in them when you're not. And are you? He asked quietly. Interested in me? The directness of the question took me by surprise. I looked at him, sitting across from me in my kitchen, wearing a t-shirt I'd lent him once and never asked for back, looking at me with those earnest eyes that seemed to see right through me. Lying felt impossible. Yes, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. But I never expected anything to happen. I value our friendship too much to risk it. Jake was quiet for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, to my utter astonishment, he smiled. I've never been with a guy before, he said slowly. Never even considered it, really. But lately, I've been thinking about you in ways that confuse me. Good ways, but confusing. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. What are you saying, Jake? He reached across the table, his hand covering mine. I'm saying I don't know what this is, but I want to find out. If you're willing to be patient with me while I figure it out. That night, Jake didn't go back to his apartment. He stayed, wearing those same blue pajamas, but this time he didn't sleep on the couch. We talked for hours about fears and expectations, about the complexities of attraction and identity. We moved slowly, cautiously, each step forward a deliberate choice made together. The first time he kissed me, tentative and questioning, I felt like my heart might burst. The first time he stayed the night in my bed, just sleeping with his arm wrapped around me, I realized that what I felt for him had grown far beyond a simple crush. It wasn't always easy. Jake struggled with telling his friends and family, with reconciling this new part of himself with the identity he'd carried for 28 years. There were arguments and misunderstandings, moments of doubt on both sides. But there was also joy, discovery, and a deepening connection that surprised us both. 6 months later, Jake moved in officially. His apartment lease was up, and it seemed silly to pay for 2 places when he spent every night in mine anyway. The blue pajamas took up permanent residence in our shared dresser, a little worn now, but still a reminder of where it all began. Sometimes, on quiet evenings when we're curled up together on the couch, I think about that stormy night and the series of coincidences that brought us together. The power outage, the spare pajamas, the courage to be honest with each other. I think about how easily it could have gone differently. If I'd been too afraid to offer him a place to stay, if he'd been too uncomfortable to accept, if either of us had been too scared to acknowledge what was growing between us. Love finds us in the strangest ways sometimes, appearing when we least expect it, often in the form of the person we never saw coming. For me, it came in the form of a straight neighbor who borrowed my pajamas one night and never really left. And I wouldn't change a thing about our story. Total _char_count, 18,763.